Hello everyone, and welcome to Sleep Triggers ASMR. You're about to enter a world where horror whispers gently in the dark. Where shadows tell stories, and the rain keeps you company. Tonight's tale will guide you through fear, softly wrapped in sound. Don't worry, you're safe here with me. Let the unease comfort you, and let each sound pull you deeper into rest. If you enjoy these immersive horror sleep experiences, please like, subscribe, and tap the so you'll never miss a night. I'll be here, waiting, every night, to tell you another story. Now, close your eyes. Take a deep breath. And let the story begin. The gravel crunched beneath the tires like brittle bones as the car pulled into the overgrown driveway. It had rained the night before, just enough to loosen the earth, to turn the edges of the weeds slick and fragrant. Above, the clouds stretched pale and thin, like gauze over a wound. The house stood at the end of the path, alone and long forgotten, as if it had been waiting for someone to come back and remember its name. Lana killed the engine. For a moment, there was silence. Not the kind of silence that calms. The kind that listens. From the back seat, 6-year-old Micah pressed his nose to the window. Is this it? Lana turned, offering a weary smile. Yes, sweetie. This is home now. In the passenger seat, Tom cleared his throat. Looks sturdy. Sturdy. Lana arched an eyebrow. That's your word for it. The porch sagged slightly to the left. The shutters had long since surrendered to the wind. Vines crept up the wooden beams like eager fingers. But the bones were there. The steep roof, the latticed windows, the curved banister, just as she remembered it. As if it had never really left her. Or maybe, as if she had never left it. From the rear, the fourth passenger stirred. Still smells the same, said Evelyn, Lana's mother, her voice papery with age. Mildew and mint. They stepped out slowly. Lana shielded her eyes from the low sun, feeling its warmth fade too quickly from her skin. The air carried the scent of old wood, wet leaves, and something else. Something deeper. Earthy. Like moss growing in closed spaces. The key turned with a little resistance. Not locked out of malice, but neglect. The door creaked open, exhaling a breath of cool, stagnant air. Micah hesitated on the threshold. Go on in, Lana said gently. Say hello. He frowned. It already said hello. Lana blinked. What? He shrugged, already walking in. Tom looked at Lana. Did he just say? He's just being dramatic. But even as she said it, Lana's skin prickled. Inside, the house was waiting. Dust shimmered in the light like ash. The furniture, covered in white sheets, stood like forgotten statues. Wallpaper peeled in curling tendrils, yellowed with time. But the structure held. The staircase still rose proud and straight, the chandelier above still hung, crooked, yes, but intact. Micah darted into the front parlor. It's big. Tom whistled low. Big and creepy. It's not creepy, Lana said. It's history. You sure it's not haunted history? I grew up here, Tom. It's just old. He chuckled, but didn't press further. From the hallway came Evelyn's voice, soft and pleased. They didn't change a thing. Lana followed her mother into the dining room. The long oak table still stood in the center, the high-backed chairs arranged precisely. Her eyes were drawn to the spot at the head, where her father used to sit. A sharp pang passed through her chest. Evelyn moved slowly, one hand trailing along the chair rail. The house remembers. Lana paused. What do you mean? Her mother just smiled, a little too knowingly, and shuffled off toward the kitchen. Later, as dusk began to deepen, Lana found Micah upstairs. He had picked the smallest bedroom, the one Lana herself had used as a girl. You sure you don't want the one across the hall? She asked. It's bigger. This one's warmer, he said. And she said I could have it. Lana frowned. Who's she? Micah was sitting cross-legged on the floor, scribbling on a sketch pad. She lives in the walls. Lana stiffened. Micah. I like her, he said simply. She's quiet. That night, after the boxes were stacked and beds were made, Lana stood by the window, gazing out at the yard bathed in moonlight. The trees whispered to each other, wind nudging their branches with lazy hands. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out. Silence replied. Behind her, Tom was brushing his teeth. You okay? He mumbled through the phone. Just tired. He stepped out, wiping his mouth. Feels different here. Like the air's heavier. It's just the country, she said. More oxygen. But even as she said it, she couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen was coiling through the rooms. Not malevolent. Just attentive. Downstairs, Evelyn stood in the kitchen. She moved slowly, ritualistically, placing 4 plates on the table. And then, after a pause, she reached into the cupboard and pulled out a 5th. She laid it down gently, like it was a memorial. A whisper of memory. Tom passed by on his way to the living room and stopped short. We're only 4. Evelyn didn't look up. It's for her. He blinked. For who? She looked up, her eyes glassy. You'll meet her soon. Tom chuckled nervously. Right. Good one. Evelyn smiled, but her eyes didn't. Later that night, after the house had settled into stillness, Lana was jolted awake. She sat up, heart thudding. The house was quiet, but not silent. Somewhere, faintly, she heard it. A soft rustling. Not from outside. From within the walls. She held her breath. Scrape, drag, whisper. She swung her legs over the edge of the bed and stood, padding barefoot down the hallway. Micah's door was open. He was asleep in bed, the sketchpad still clutched in one hand. Lana reached down and gently pulled it free. She flipped to the last drawing. Her breath caught. A girl. Pale, long-haired, crouched inside a wall. Eyes black as coal. Mouth open in a wide, hungry grin. At the bottom, Micah had written one sentence in crayon. She doesn't like to be forgotten. Morning came slow. The sun poured through thin curtains like weak tea, staining the room with dusty gold. Outside, dew clung to the weeds and wildflowers that had overtaken the garden. Everything smelled of wet soil and waking memory. Lana stood in the kitchen doorway, staring at the table. 5 plates. Again. Tom hadn't gotten up yet, and Micah was still tucked under his blanket, clutching the same crayon drawing he'd fallen asleep with. But Evelyn was already at the table. Her hands folded in front of her hair brushed neatly down her back, the silver streaks catching the light like threads of frost. "Mom," Lana said softly, "why are there 5 plates again?" Evelyn didn't look up from her place setting. "She doesn't like to be excluded," she murmured. Lana frowned. "Who?" A beat passed. The silence seemed to press against Lana's chest. Evelyn looked up then, and for a flicker of a second, there was something in her eyes that didn't belong. Something ancient. Then it was gone. "I always set 5, she said brightly. "It's just habit, darling. Don't be so jumpy." Lana crossed her arms. "No, you didn't. Not when Dad was gone. Not when it was just you and me." Evelyn's smile twitched. "Maybe I'm just happy we're whole again." "We're 4, Mom. There's no 5th person." Evelyn turned her gaze slowly to the plate at the end of the table, the one directly facing the kitchen door. "She thinks you've forgotten." Micah didn't eat much that morning. He pushed his eggs around with his fork, staring at the wall like he was listening to something beyond it. "You okay, buddy?" Tom asked. Micah nodded without speaking. Evelyn buttered her toast with precise, practiced motions. "He's just adjusting." Houses speak slowly. But he hears them. Tom glanced sideways. "You mean, like, metaphorically?" Evelyn didn't answer. Later that afternoon, Lana found her son in the hallway upstairs. He was kneeling beside the wall, both hands pressed flat against the old floral wallpaper. His lips moved silently, as if whispering back. "Micah?" He startled. She knelt beside him. "What were you doing?" "I was listening." "Listening to what?" He frowned. "She's hungry again." Lana felt her chest tighten. "Micah, who is she?" He didn't answer. Instead, he pointed to a section of the wall near the baseboard. "Her mouth is there." Lana stared. There was nothing unusual. Just faded paint. a warped section of trim. She reached out and touched it. It was cool to the touch, slightly damp. Then she leaned in, pressing her ear to the wall. Silence. But just as she started to pull away, knock. From inside. A small, deliberate knock. 3 times. She gasped and fell back. Her heart pounded like a drumbeat. Micah didn't flinch. She wants you to say hello. Tom didn't believe her. They sat in the living room that night, Lana staring into her cup of cold coffee. She knocked. Tom. I swear. I didn't imagine it. Tom exhaled slowly. Okay. Let's say that's true. Let's say something knocked. Maybe it's plumbing, or mice, or just old wood settling. Inside the wall. With a rhythm. It's an old house, babe. Lana clenched her jaw. Micah said she was hungry. Tom smiled awkwardly. Kids are weird. You know that. She didn't answer. But in the silence that followed, she realized something strange. She hadn't told Tom that the knock was 3 beats. Yet, somewhere deep in the walls, at that exact moment, she heard it again. Knock. 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 Tom didn't react. As if it was meant only for her. That night, Micah refused to sleep alone. She's mad at me, he said, crawling into their bed. Why would she be mad? Lana asked softly, brushing his hair back. I didn't finish the picture. Lana's heart thudded. What picture? He turned his head into the pillow. The one she wanted me to draw. The one that shows the door. Downstairs, Evelyn was awake. She stood in the kitchen, humming. The 5th plate was back. Polished. Perfect. Steam curled from the meal she had plated, a dinner none of them remembered cooking. Not that night. Not any night. Chicken. Biscuits. Green beans. All warm. And yet no one had touched the stove. The fork on the 5th plate twitched. Moved. Scraped softly against ceramic. Evelyn didn't flinch. She simply smiled, and turned off the light. Sometime before dawn, Lana woke with a start. She wasn't sure why. The room was still. Tom snored quietly beside her. Micah was curled in the blanket like a kitten. She sat up, listening. There it was again. That faint, wet sound. Chewing. Not loud. Not sloppy. Precise. Purposeful. Coming from beneath the floorboards. Coming from the kitchen. She rose, heart thudding, and tiptoed down the stairs. The hallway was dim, lit only by the dying moonlight spilling in through the tall front windows. Her steps were slow, deliberate. The house creaked gently around her. The kitchen door was ajar. She pushed it open. The table was empty. But the 5th plate, was scraped clean. The next morning, the house felt colder. Not in temperature, but in spirit. Something had shifted. Subtle, but unmistakable. Like a breath that no longer wanted to be held. Lana noticed it first in the dining room. The chairs were not where they had left them. Slightly out of place. As if someone had pushed away from the table in haste. As if someone had stood up. And the fifth plate. Gone. Not just cleared. Gone. No trace. No crumbs. No fork. Not in the dishwasher. Not in the sink. Not in the trash. Mom. Lana called gently, poking her head into Evelyn's room. Evelyn was sitting upright in bed, a book resting closed on her lap, though she didn't appear to be reading it. Yes, dear. Did you clean up the plate last night? Evelyn blinked slowly. No, she doesn't like to be touched after she eats. Evelyn smiled without showing her teeth. She's particular. Downstairs, Micah had taken up residence in the window seat at the end of the hallway. He was drawing again. This time, with a red crayon. What are you working on? Lana asked, kneeling beside him. He turned the pad toward her. It was the dining room. Drawn from the perspective of someone sitting at the end of the table. In the drawing, the four family members sat in their usual spots. But behind them, drawn with harsh, vertical red lines, stood a fifth figure. Faceless. Lurking. Watching. She doesn't like where you sit, Micah said simply. Lana looked down at him. Where I sit? He nodded. That used to be her spot. A cold, invisible thread slid down Lana's spine. Did she tell you that? She didn't have to. That evening, Tom suggested they eat in the living room. Just to mix things up, he said lightly, balancing two paper plates on his forearms. TV dinner, old school. Evelyn didn't protest. She remained in the kitchen, quietly stirring something in a pot that didn't smell like any food Lana recognized. Herbs and something, iron-rich. Something metallic. Lana lifted her plate from the counter and turned toward the doorway. Behind her, a faint creak. She paused. When she turned, the fifth chair was pulled out again. Not by them. Not by anyone. But clearly moved. Like a child holding out their hand, asking silently to be invited in. That night, Tom had a dream. Or perhaps, the house had one for him. He was sitting at the table alone. The room around him was dark, but the table was lit by a single hanging bulb, too bright, too white. His plate was empty. Then a chair scraped back across the wood floor beside him. He turned. A figure sat next to him. He couldn't see her face. Just her silhouette. Hair down to her waist. Thin arms. Pale hands with long, delicate fingers. She lifted her fork and held it out to him. Eat, she whispered. Tom woke with a gasp, sweat cold on his neck. Beside him, Lana was still asleep. Micah, too. But in the dim light from the hallway, he saw something impossible. There was an impression in the comforter, as if someone else had been lying in the bed between them. The next morning, Tom didn't mention the dream, but he avoided the dining room. And when Lana asked what he wanted for breakfast, he just shook his head and said, "I'm not hungry." At noon, Micah refused to go outside. Lana found him crouched in the pantry, eyes wide. "She doesn't like it when I leave the house," he said softly. "Micah, there's nothing stopping you. It's just grass and bugs and air. She said she can't follow me outside. Not yet. But if I leave too long, she'll punish you." "Me? She likes you most," he said. "Because you took her seat." That evening, Evelyn insisted on setting the table herself. "No one else touches the fifth plate," she warned, gently smacking Lana's wrist when she tried to help. "Is this the game to you?" Lana asked, her voice shaking slightly. "Or is something actually happening in this house?" Evelyn looked at her for a long, long moment. "I tried to warn my mother," she said. "She didn't listen, either." Lana stepped back. Evelyn smoothed the tablecloth with a wrinkleless hand. "Do you know why this house never rotted? Why the wood never warped and the roof never caved in? Even after 20 winters without a soul inside?" Lana didn't answer. Evelyn smiled. "Because we always left her a seat." That night, the chewing returned. Not under the floor this time. In the wall. Just behind the headboard of their bed. Gnashing. Grinding. Wet. Lana sat upright. Tom was already awake, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. "You hear that?" He nodded slowly. "Did you dream again?" "Yes." Lana waited. Tom didn't speak for a long time. Then he whispered, "She was closer." In the morning, when Lana awoke, she found something strange in the kitchen. A sixth plate. Sitting beside the fifth. Empty. Clean. Waiting. The sixth plate remained untouched. That morning, no one mentioned it. No one dared. It just sat there. Next to the fifth. Side by side like matching headstones. Tom drank his coffee in silence, eyes darting toward the dining room every few minutes, as if expecting someone, or something, to come sit. Micah didn't eat. He only stared. Evelyn hummed softly as she stirred a pot on the stove, her back to them. A low, aimless melody. Something without beginning or end. The kind of tune you hum when you don't want to remember what silence sounds like. Lana tried to speak. "Mom." But Evelyn didn't turn around. Instead, she said, she wasn't satisfied last night. Later, Lana caught Micah near the basement door. He had a spoon in one hand. and raw hamburger in the other. Micah? Her voice broke in surprise. What are you doing? She's hungry. Micah, no. You can't feed her raw meat. His lip trembled. She said if I don't, she'll take you down with her. Lana grabbed his arm and snatched the meat away, tossing it into the trash with shaking hands. No one is taking anyone anywhere, she said. Do you hear me? Micah didn't answer. He just stared at the basement door. It was ajar. Lana hadn't opened it. Neither had Tom. And Evelyn hadn't gone down those steps in years. But now, a faint draft slithered up from the dark below. And with it, came a smell. Faint. Foul. Rotting, but sweet. Like meat that had remembered what it used to be. That night, they tried to skip dinner. It was Tom's idea. Maybe we just break the rhythm. No plates. No forks. No seats. She can't eat if we don't set the table. They ordered pizza. Ate it in their laps in the living room with a movie playing loud enough to cover the house's natural groans. For a while, it worked. Micah even laughed at a joke. Evelyn didn't join them. She stayed in the kitchen, whispering to the open pantry. Lana heard her once say, "It's not my fault. They're the ones ignoring you." Around 2 a.m., the house let out a scream. Not a human scream. A structural one. The kind of scream wood makes when it warps too fast. When something behind the drywall shifts just slightly, into place. The sound jolted Lana and Tom from sleep. Micah stood at the foot of their bed. He looked dazed. Feverish. His cheeks pale and wet with tears. "She's starving," he said. Then vomited red across the carpet. The doctor at urgent care said it was probably food poisoning. But Micah hadn't eaten anything. Nothing at all. "I need to know," Lana said, her voice low and urgent as they drove home, "what happened in this house before. Before we moved in." Tom tightened his grip on the steering wheel. The realtor said it was empty 20 years. No record of owners. Just that your mom's family held the deed. Lana shook her head. "No. Something's buried here. Not just in the walls, deeper." Tom looked at her. "You mean like a body?" "No," she said. "Worse." That night, Evelyn was waiting for them on the porch. She sat in the rocking chair. Rocking. Rocking. In her lap, she held a cloth bundle. When she stood, she handed it to Lana. Inside were 4 old photographs. Yellowed, curling at the edges. Each showed a family seated at the same dining table. Different people. Different decades. But always the same room. Same table. Same 5th seat. And always the same blur. At the end of the table, beside the mother, sat a figure too smudged to see clearly. as if the camera lens had tried to forget. "She's always been hungry," Evelyn whispered. "And always someone tries to ignore her. Until she teaches them." They didn't sleep that night. Not really. Tom sat by the bedroom door, holding a baseball bat. Lana lay beside Micah, listening for sounds. But the house had grown very, very quiet. Which was worse. Because silence, in this house, was never peace. It was listening. Waiting. And beneath it, something wet breathed. In the morning, the sixth plate was full. And beside it, a seventh. The seventh plate wasn't made of porcelain. It was wood. Old. Hand-carved. Cracked in a dozen places along its rim. And on it sat nothing. Not food. Not crumbs. Not even dust. But the space it took up on the table felt heavy. Like it used to contain something that didn't want to be remembered. Tom didn't touch it. Neither did Lana. Evelyn only nodded when she saw it, as if its arrival had confirmed something she'd been dreading. "She remembers now," she whispered. "What was taken?" Micah didn't come down for breakfast. He didn't call out. When Lana went upstairs to check on him, she found his room ice cold, even though the windows were shut. Micah stood in the corner, facing the wall. Not crying. Not humming. Just breathing. And drawn on the wall, in dozens of looping circles, was the image of the table. Over and over again. Each drawing more distorted than the last. In some, the chairs were knocked over. In others, the plates had mouths. Bleeding mouths. "Micah?" Lana touched his shoulder gently. He turned around, and she gasped. His eyes were bloodshot. And under his fingernails, flakes of plaster. "You can hear her too now, can't you?" he said softly. Downstairs, Tom paced the dining room. The chairs remained in place. But now there were scratches on the floor. Long, curving ones, concentric like rings around the table's base. Not random. Not accidental. Claw marks. Tom bent down to trace one with his finger. The wood dipped deep, splintered in the center. But not fresh. Old. Covered. Hidden under layers of stain and time until now. Until she wanted them seen. That night, Lana had the dream. The same one Micah and Tom had described. She was seated at the table. Alone. The lights above flickered, warm, then cold, then burning white. The smell of old meat and rust flooded her nose. She heard chewing. Slow, wet chewing. But it wasn't in front of her. It was behind her. She tried to turn, but her body wouldn't respond. Then she felt breath. Not warm. Not cold. Just wrong. It whispered. You sat where she died. She awoke choking. Coughing dust. Her mouth filled with it. Not from her pillow. From inside the walls. Something had poured grit into her throat while she slept. Tom helped her up, wiping her mouth. On the bedsheets, tiny white shavings of plaster. And something else. A single tooth. Too small to be adult. Too old to belong to Micah. They tore open the wall the next day. Tom didn't argue this time. He brought a hammer and crowbar. Together, he and Lana removed the panels near the baseboard behind their bed. At first, they found insulation. Then bones. Small ones. Dozens. Arranged in the shape of a hand, as if something had been pressing outward for years. Wanting out. Or beckoning in. Micah stood in the doorway, pale and silent. She lived behind there when the food stopped, he said. Before Grandma was born. Before any of us. Lana looked back at him. How do you know that? He pointed at the wall. She told me. That night, no one spoke. Evelyn stayed in her room. Tom took shift standing guard. And Lana sat at the dining table, staring at the seventh plate. She didn't know why. Only that she felt she had to. At exactly 3:03 a.m., she heard footsteps upstairs. Light ones. Like bare feet. Micah's door creaked open. Then closed. But he never came down. The footsteps stopped at the top of the stairs. Waited. Then turned around. At dawn, Micah was gone. Not outside. Not in the yard. Not under the house. Gone. Vanished. His bed untouched. His drawings, all blank. The pencil lines had been erased perfectly. Only the indentations remained. As if the house had swallowed the lead. They searched every room. They screamed his name. They called the police. No one came. The line was dead. Even the air felt different, thicker. Denser. Like every breath passed through someone else's lungs first. Then they found the note. Taped under the seventh plate. In Micah's handwriting. I sat where she wanted. She said I could stay if I stayed quiet. But you have to keep feeding her now. She gets angry if she's forgotten. Don't forget. Don't let her starve. The house stopped pretending. That morning, Lana woke up to find all the walls breathing. Not literally, there was no visible movement, but the wallpaper pulsed, gently expanding and contracting like lungs full of old air. A rhythm so subtle that if you stared too long, you'd either see it or go mad wondering if you did. Tom didn't sleep. He sat upright in the hallway all night, clutching a flashlight that had long since gone dim. The seventh plate was gone. In its place, a folded napkin. Inside it, a single word written in dried brown ink. Clara. Evelyn sat at the kitchen table, stirring a cup of cold tea with an empty spoon. She's telling you now, she said without looking up. You must be next. Clara, Lana said slowly. Is that her name? Evelyn didn't answer at first. Then, she laughed. A dry, broken little laugh. No. That's the name they gave her. The ones who thought naming her would make her human again. Tom leaned against the doorframe. So who is she? Evelyn finally looked up. Her eyes had sunk deep into her face. Her skin was pale as parchment. She seemed less there than before. She was the daughter. Or the wife. Or the mother. No one remembers now. Only that she sat at the end of the table and waited too long. Starved in a house full of food. They left her down there with the bones. Told her she had to be quiet. She didn't stay quiet, Lana whispered. No, Evelyn said. She learned how to whisper back. Lana dug through the old files in the attic that afternoon. Not for Micah. Not anymore. She didn't believe he was missing. Not in the traditional sense. She believed he'd been invited. Down there. Behind the walls. To sit where she had. She found a bundle of old tax forms and title documents. Property transfers. One thing in common. Every 40 years, the deed passed back to Evelyn's family. Always by inheritance. Always after a sudden death. Tom pulled down a box labeled Belfield Family 1880 to 1920. Inside were photographs. 12 families. 12 faces. 12 tables. Always 5 seats filled. Always a 6th added later. And always, in the last photo of each family, someone missing. Her cycle, Lana said. She feeds on memory, Tom added. On forgetting. On being ignored. He handed Lana a torn page from a journal tucked behind the photos. Mother says if we don't set her plate, she will grow quiet again. But the quiet is worse. The quiet is when she touches you in your sleep. February 2nd, 1901. That night, the table reset itself. They didn't set it. But when Lana came downstairs, the dining room was immaculate. 6 plates. 6 chairs. A faint hum vibrating through the floorboards. She sat. She didn't know why. She just did. Across from her, the 7th chair remained empty. And yet, the napkin folded itself. A single word formed in her mind before the ink even appeared. Say it. Tom came down moments later and saw her seated there, eyes wide. Lana, he said, but it echoed like a name shouted down a well. She didn't respond. She was listening. To something beneath. A sound like fingers brushing wallpaper. Like someone climbing up. Lana. He pulled her from the chair. She blinked. And screamed. Because the chair across from hers was no longer empty. Just for a second. A flash of pale arms. A mouth too wide for a child. And eyes that bled into the tablecloth like spilled ink. Then gone. They didn't sleep. They couldn't. The house was awake now. Fully. And in its bones, it remembered. The pipes wept rust. The doorframe swelled with humidity that wasn't in the air. The floor moaned in the patterns of old lullabies. And in every mirror, just for a heartbeat, they saw her. Not Clara. The thing that used to be her. In the basement, they found the old bricks again. Where Micah used to draw. Only now the bricks were wet. Seeping a dark syrup from between the cracks. It smelled like sweet vinegar and grave dirt. Tom leaned close. Then jerked back. Behind the bricks, something had moved. Not animal. Not human. But aware. Watching. Breathing. Waiting. Lana held the napkin up to the light. Clara, she whispered. Nothing happened. Then louder, Clara. The bricks creaked. Tom took her hand. Don't say it again. But Lana didn't listen. She stared into the dark. And spoke for the third time. Clara. The house exhaled. All the lights went out. In the darkness, a sound rose. Like a woman laughing. Like a child screaming. Like cutlery scraping across bone. And in the silence that followed, a single voice spoke. You remembered me. Now remember what you did. There used to be 6 steps between the foyer and the dining room. Now there were 5. Tom noticed first. He counted them twice, once going down, once going back up. The middle step was gone. Not broken. Just, not there anymore. As if the house had quietly rearranged itself, subtracting where no one would notice. Except they did. Because when Evelyn tried to walk down for breakfast, she fell. Hard. They helped her up from the floor. Her nose was bleeding. Her fingers shaking. She looked at Lana like she didn't recognize her. And said, "Have you seen my daughter? The little one, with the red hair." Lana's voice caught in her throat. "You mean me?" Evelyn blinked. Shook her head. "No, no. Not you. Clara." The air had changed. It wasn't colder, exactly. But thicker. Like it clung to their skin. Everything smelled of damp wood and old perfume. The radio in the kitchen, long broken, clicked on by itself, playing a distant lullaby in reverse. In the hallway, picture frames had been rearranged. Micah's baby photo was gone. In its place, a sepia portrait of a different boy. Unsmiling. Too still. Lana touched the frame, and pulled her hand away with a hiss. The glass was hot. Tom tried to drive to town that afternoon. The car wouldn't start. No signal on his phone. No road outside. Just fog. Solid. Pale. Endless. He stepped 2 feet past the mailbox and saw nothing beyond. No trees. No wind. No sky. He turned back toward the house, and for one terrible moment, he couldn't find it. Just more fog. Until he heard the sound. A soft tapping. Like fingernails under floorboards. Leading him back. Lana didn't remember the name of her first school. Or her maiden name. Or the year she was born. She wrote them down, just to be sure. But the words blurred. Slipped away. Rearranged into nonsense letters that curled on the page like worms. She stared into the bathroom mirror and tried to say her own name out loud. Nothing came out. Only the whisper. Not yours anymore. That night, the dining room changed again. This time there were 8 chairs. And 2 of them were filled. Not with people. With shadows shaped like people. One had Evelyn's smile. The other wore Lana's old dress. They didn't move. They didn't breathe. But when the candle flickered, they turned their heads. Tom dragged a sledgehammer into the living room. "I'm done," he said. "We're tearing up the floors. All the way down." Evelyn sobbed in the kitchen. "Don't dig too deep," she whispered. "That's how the blood comes up." But Tom didn't care. He pried up the first floorboard. Then the second. Then the third. Beneath them was not dirt. Not concrete. But another layer of wood. An identical floor. Same grain. Same stains. As if the house had copied itself underneath. He kept going. 3 layers deep. Still wood. Still the same. Then, a knock. From beneath. He froze. So did Lana, watching from the doorway. 3 slow knocks. From under the floor. Then a voice. "Too late. You already let me in." The lights blew out. The house shook, not from earthquake, but like something shivering in anticipation. A smell rose from the open floor, sour milk and candle wax. Lana grabbed Evelyn's arm. "We need to go. Now." Evelyn didn't move. She just pointed. To the window. Outside, standing on the lawn, was Micah. Smiling. Holding a fork. Waving them in. Lana ran outside. The fog swallowed her instantly. Micah vanished. She turned in every direction. The house behind her faded. Then reappeared. But wrong. Taller. With extra windows. Some of them open from the inside. She stepped backward, and felt something crunch beneath her shoe. She looked down. A baby tooth. Still wet. Still warm. Back inside, Evelyn stood at the head of the table. Alone. She looked at the 7th plate. Then the 8th. Then the 9th. Then at nothing. And whispered, "Clara, please. You had your turn." Something in the walls laughed. And the chandelier above her began to drip wax that wasn't wax at all. But fat. Human. Still pulsing. Still alive. Tom swung the hammer again. And this time, the floor splintered. Beneath the wood was not more wood, but a face. Pale. Eyeless. Smiling. It opened its mouth and whispered a name neither of them had ever spoken before. And yet, it was theirs. Lana dreamt that night, though she couldn't remember falling asleep. She walked down the hallway of their house, only everything was mirrored. Left was right, right was left, and the photos on the wall blinked when she passed. She found herself standing in the bathroom, looking into the mirror. And the mirror looked back. But it wasn't her reflection. It was the house. It wore her face. Not like a mask, but like a memory trying to be remembered. "I know who you are," it whispered. "You're the one who left the door open." She woke up to her own voice screaming. Only it wasn't her. Tom burst into the room, breathless. "I heard you calling," he said. "I didn't," Lana whispered. They stared at each other for a long moment. And then Tom said, "You look different." Lana touched her face. Same skin, same shape. But the freckles had moved. Her left eye seemed slightly lower than it should have been. Her cheekbone unfamiliar. Downstairs, the photos had changed again. Now every picture frame showed Lana. But not the same version. Different clothes. Different ages. Some smiling. Some screaming. In one photo, she stood outside a different house entirely, holding the hand of a child she didn't recognize. In another, she sat at a table identical to theirs, only she was older. Much older. And there were 7 people behind her, blurred like shadows trying to wear flesh. Tom opened the hall closet and found his own shirt, except it wasn't his size. Smaller. More worn. Sewn with a name tag. Property of Thomas Belfield, age 9. He didn't remember owning it. But it smelled like him. Down to the cologne his father used. He reached into the coat pocket and pulled out a folded napkin. It read, "You sat here before." Evelyn had stopped speaking. She moved slowly now, like her bones belonged to someone else. Lana watched her retrace her steps in the living room, again and again, her lips twitching silently. Finally, Evelyn whispered, "She's using us to remember herself." "Who?" Lana asked. "The house," Evelyn replied. "The one that fed her. That forgot her. That became her." Later that evening, Tom stood by the attic door. He couldn't say why. It felt warm, like sunlight behind it. He opened it slowly. The staircase inside was longer than it should have been. Too long. Too dark. He climbed. And at the top, found a room identical to Lana's childhood bedroom. Same quilt. Same stuffed animals. Same nightlight in the corner, still glowing blue. He hadn't seen it in over 20 years. He stepped inside, knees weak. On the desk, a photo of his own mother. Smiling. But in the background of the photo, the house. Not their childhood home. This house. From before. He turned to leave, but the door was gone. Just wall. The room breathed around him. And a voice, very close to his ear, whispered, "Welcome home." Lana searched for him for hours. But the upstairs had changed. The hallway twisted, doors appeared where walls once were. Her bedroom was now the kitchen. The stairs led down, not up. Every time she opened a door, she found herself sleeping, crying, washing blood from her hands. In one room, she stood before a dining table, but every version of her had no face. And each whispered, in unison, "You set the table. You invited her in." When Lana finally found Tom, he was sitting in the attic again. Or maybe it wasn't the attic. It had no windows. No walls. Just black space and candlelight. And a table. Set for 9. He didn't turn when she spoke his name. She had to pull him up, dragging him down the stairwell, both of them breathless. But when they reached the bottom, they were standing in the basement. And the attic door was still open behind them. Evelyn was waiting at the bottom step. She held an old porcelain doll. One eye missing. Dress burned at the edges. "She's almost done with us," she said. "Then she'll start over. New faces. New rooms. She likes to redecorate." "What does she want?" Lana asked. Evelyn smiled with cracked lips. "She wants to be remembered." That night, the table changed again. 10 chairs now. All filled. Except 2. Lana's and Tom's. Their names carved into the wood. Not written. Carved. They tried not to sit. But the lights dimmed. The doors locked. And the house said, in 100 voices at once, "Dinner is served." The house no longer obeyed time. Morning never came. Not really. Only a kind of grayness that pooled in corners and soaked the walls. The clocks ticked backward. The TV played static loops of family sitcoms that no one remembered filming, each laugh track sounding like someone gasping underwater. And when Tom touched the front door again, he felt his own heartbeat pulsing on the wood. That day, Evelyn whispered something new. "They showed me the room," she said. Lana looked up from the kitchen table, where she had been trying to write her name for the 3rd hour. Every letter slid off the page like water. What room? Evelyn smiled softly. The one I died in. They found it behind the linen closet. A narrow staircase they had never seen before. Dustless. Warm. Too warm. It led to a room painted butter yellow, with lace curtains and a single bed made with military precision. On the dresser, a music box playing a familiar tune. Lana turned the key. It stopped. The room vibrated. And the walls spoke. This is where she forgot you. Tom found a map later that night. Not a real one, drawn in crayon, folded inside an old cereal box in the pantry. It showed the house. Not just this house, but versions of it. Stacked like nesting dolls. Each one slightly smaller. Slightly older. At the center, a black room labeled simply Mother. Evelyn began sleeping in closets. Said the beds were too loud. They whisper when I lie down, she muttered. Tell me what I used to be. One morning, Lana found her in the bathtub. Fully dressed. Holding her breath. Eyes wide open. Staring up at the ceiling like it might open. She only said one thing. She's cleaning the rooms. Lana tried to keep count of the rooms. There were 21, then 23. One had a piano that played itself, but only backwards. Another was filled with mirrors that reflected different memories. In one mirror, Lana was a little girl. She was holding Evelyn's hand, but Evelyn was younger, too. And crying. They stood at the foot of this very house, only it was crumbling, vine-choked, bleeding from its windows like open wounds. Tom stopped sleeping. Said the beds kept sinking. Said he woke up one night and found himself buried inside a wall. He had to claw his way out. Still had splinters in his arms. Still heard the heartbeat in the wood. I don't think we're people anymore, he whispered. Lana said nothing. Because she'd started to think the same. At dinner time, the table was fully set. 11 chairs. 11 plates. One for each room they'd slept in. Each time they used a room, another seat appeared. One evening, they tried to leave the table untouched. Just once. In protest. That night, the pantry was empty. No food. No water. Just teeth. Hundreds of baby teeth, scattered on the shelves like rice. Some still bleeding. Some still growing. Evelyn stopped answering to her name. She called herself Mother. Only not in a proud way. In a small, childlike voice, like she'd been told that once and never unlearned it. She walked the halls backwards. She scratched words into the wallpaper with a fork. When Lana looked closely, the words said, "We eat what we are. We are what we forget." Then came the room with no door. Lana saw it first. A seam in the wall behind the fridge. a place she never would have noticed, until she heard her own voice behind it. Crying. Whispering a lullaby she hadn't sung since Micah was born. She tore the wallpaper off, clawed at the plaster. Behind it, a room, identical to her bedroom, only burned black. Walls charred, mattress rotted, but in the corner sat a shape, like a person, but melted, still breathing, wearing Lana's necklace, still warm. She stumbled back, and the shape lifted its head, whispered in her voice, "You left me here too long." She ran, all the way to the backyard, where the swing still moved on its own, where the trees no longer had leaves. She dug with her hands, found something just under the soil. A shoebox. Inside, a lock of hair. Her own. Braided. Wrapped in wax paper that smelled like smoke and sugar. A note inside read, "Property of the second Lana." Back in the house, the light was red. Not sunset. Not fire. Just red. Tom sat in the corner, scribbling on the wall. A spiral of names. Most not theirs. All familiar. Every one of them ended with the same word. Gone. There are rooms where people are born. Rooms where they live. Rooms where they die. But in this house, there are rooms where they are remembered wrong. And every time that happens, another version grows. More accurate. More patient. More hungry. It started with a drawing. Lana found it taped to the fridge, written in crayon that smelled faintly of smoke. A stick figure family, hand in hand, a man, a woman, a child. Underneath, the caption, "My other family." The child had no face. Just an empty oval where features should be. And above their heads was a crude shape, unmistakable even in a child's hand. The house. Lana stared at it for hours. "I didn't draw this," she said aloud. Tom didn't respond. He stood at the window, watching something outside, a flicker of movement that kept disappearing between the trees. "Where's Micah?" she asked. Silence. Then, "Micah doesn't live here." She found Evelyn in the laundry room, folding clothes that weren't theirs. Child-sized jeans. Tiny socks with the name, Becca, stitched in pink thread. "Who's Becca?" Lana asked. Evelyn didn't look up. She liked strawberry milk, she said. Hated thunderstorms. Died on the stairs. Lana's mouth went dry. She lived here. Evelyn blinked slowly. "No, dear," she said. She never left. Later, Lana opened the hallway closet and found more drawings. All children's art. 100 different styles. Some done in crayon. Some in marker. Some scratched into wood with what looked like fingernails. All the children had the same face, blank. All the houses had eyes. And one drawing showed a child curled inside a wall, saying, "Mommy forgot me again." Tom found something worse. An album. Old-fashioned, leather-bound. No dust, as if it had just been opened. Inside, photos of a baby. Dozens of them. At first, Lana thought it was Micah. But the dates were wrong. The clothes, outdated. Each page labeled in careful handwriting. Micah, month 1. Micah, month 4. Micah, year 2. The final page was blank. Except for one sentence scrawled in red pen. This time, raise him right. They tore through the house, searching for him. Every room echoed his name. Every hallway folded into the next. No doors led outside anymore. Only back. Only deeper. At the top of the stairs, Lana opened a door and found Micah sitting in a crib. Smiling. Unbothered. "Sweetheart," she whispered, running toward him. But as she neared, her reflection appeared in the window behind the crib. And it wasn't her. It was an older woman, with eyes hollowed by grief. The woman spoke, even though Lana couldn't hear her voice. She mouthed, "Don't touch him. He's not yours." Lana stepped back. Micah blinked. Smiled again. But his eyes weren't right. Too dark. Too still. Like glass buttons sewn in the wrong place. Tom reached the crib first. Lifted the child gently. His hands trembled. The baby cooed. But the sound was metallic. Like a cassette tape playing backward. Tom looked at Lana. This isn't him. And the baby's face slid for just a second. Like skin over something else. Then the room collapsed. They awoke in the living room. Together. But everything felt wrong. The photos on the walls were now of Micah. All ages. All eras. One showed him as a teenager, tall and shadow-eyed. Another as an old man in a wheelchair. Each frame labeled with the same name. Micah, variant. Evelyn began screaming at mirrors. Not out of fear. Out of recognition. "They brought me back," she muttered. "But they mixed me up." She pointed at herself in the mirror and screamed. "That's not my son." The house rearranged itself again. Now, every bedroom had a crib. Each labeled with a different name. Becca. Noah. Eleanor. Micah. Micah again. Micah again. Each crib held a bundle. Some empty. Some moving. Tom refused to sleep anymore. He sat in the bathtub every night, holding a baby monitor they found in the basement. It played sounds of children crying. Always different voices. Sometimes whispering. Sometimes laughing. Never stopping. One morning, they woke up to find a new hallway. A long one. Cold. And at the end, a nursery. Perfectly arranged. Mobile spinning. Walls painted soft lavender. And on the far wall, a mural. Lana stared in horror. It was them. Her, Tom, Evelyn. All holding hands around the house. All smiling. Only, the faces were wrong. Drawn too long. Eyes too big. Mouths open, smiling too wide. Like they'd been sketched by something that had seen them, but had never been human. On the ceiling above the crib. Painted words. You promised to keep me. Tom tried to burn the room. Poured lighter fluid across the crib. Lit a match. But the flame turned cold. Blue. And the walls began to sing. A lullaby in a dozen overlapping voices. All childlike. All broken. Mama made me, Mama left me. Papa fed me, Papa wept me. But the house, it kept me. Tom collapsed. Bleeding from the nose. Evelyn simply laughed. It always wanted children, she said. But it never said whose. That night, they both dreamed the same dream. A dinner table, infinite in length. Children seated on both sides. But they had no faces. Just mouths. And the mouths whispered. Feed us more stories. Feed us more names. At the end of the table sat the house. Its walls shifting like breath. Its windows blinking like eyes. And in its voice, which was also Micah's, it said, You were never parents. Just recipes. They stopped asking how long they'd been inside the house. Time was no longer linear, just a spiral. Each morning felt like a retelling of something that already happened. Each night felt like a punishment for asking the wrong questions. But Lana still remembered the first time they arrived. Or at least, she thought she did. Until she found the journal. It was tucked behind a panel in the attic, inside a wooden chest stamped with initials she didn't recognize. M.F. The journal smelled of ash and rosemary. The first page was a list. Evelyn, 3rd. Thomas, 4th. Lana, 6th. Micah. Mother, 1st. Beneath that. Do not trust the order. The house rearranges memory. Every entry was written in different handwriting. Some were neat and logical. Others frantic. Childlike. One scrawled entry was in what looked like charcoal and read. She built the house from grief. Then it started eating. Another. Every child that died here stayed. But not as ghosts. As instructions. Tom found an old photograph in the basement. Sepia tone. A family of 5 standing outside a skeletal version of the house. No windows. No doors. just open framing and tar-black shingles. The man held a hammer. The woman cradled a bundle wrapped in flannel. The children all stared at the camera. Their faces blurred, not by age or decay, but like something deliberately smeared by heat. On the back, a name had been burned into the paper. First Lana. Do you think we've lived here before? Tom asked her one night. No, she said. Then paused. Maybe. He didn't ask again. Because by then, neither of them were sleeping. The rooms had begun to repeat. They'd walk through the kitchen only to find themselves in another kitchen, same wallpaper, same dishes in the sink, but the photo on the fridge would be different. Sometimes it showed Lana with another man. Sometimes it showed Tom, much older, standing alone in a hallway full of clocks. In one version, the fridge had no magnets. Just a single knife, stabbed into the door. A note pinned beneath it read, "You're the last version I'll allow." Evelyn spent days reading the walls. Not staring at them, reading them. Because the wallpaper patterns had changed. Subtly. If you looked long enough, they formed words. Instructions. Warnings. Sometimes prayers. In the nursery, the words formed a loop that said, "Do not pick up the baby. It's not for you." But then in the master bedroom, scrawled faintly above the bed, "Hold him close, or he forgets." Lana tried both. Nothing changed. Or maybe everything did. They found a mirror that showed another version of the hallway. In the reflection, the walls were cracked. The floor was soaked. But more importantly, there was someone else in the mirror. An older woman. Sitting on the floor, whispering a name. Thomas. Thomas. But the voice was Evelyn's. Lana reached for the mirror. The reflection reached back. And whispered. Tell her she built it wrong. That night, Evelyn stopped speaking. She only hummed. The same lullaby. Over and over. When Lana finally snapped, yelling at her to stop, Evelyn looked up with wide, vacant eyes and said, "I'm just keeping the house asleep." Tom tried the basement door again. It was bricked shut. But behind the bricks, they heard breathing. Slow. Rhythmic. Like something enormous and sleeping. Lana placed her hand on the wall. It was warm. A heartbeat, again. Only deeper now. Older. She whispered. Who's down there? The answer came like a wind through the keyhole. You are. They stopped talking about Micah. The child had become a suggestion. Sometimes they saw his shape. Sometimes they heard him playing down the hall. But when they approached, he was always gone. The only trace, a smell of burnt sugar and wet wood. One night, Lana opened a door and found a nursery entirely made of stone, lit by torches. In the crib, a bundle wrapped in velvet. When she lifted it, it crumbled into ash. At the bottom of the ash, a tooth with her initials engraved. In the attic, they found another door. Locked. But not with a key, with a riddle. Burned into the wood. I am always present but never seen. I change everything but cannot be held. What am I? Tom whispered the answer, time. The door clicked open. Inside, a small room filled with dozens of clocks. All ticking at different speeds. On the far wall, a mural, painted over and over again, in layers. Lana scratched at it until the top flaked off. Beneath it, another painting. Then another. Each one showing a family. A man, a woman, a child. Over and over. But the faces stayed the same. Just the clothes changed. Just the eras changed. One painting was dated 1913. One, 1956. Another, 2023. They were always here. They'd always been here. Back downstairs, Evelyn finally spoke again. She whispered. The house doesn't have an origin. It has a purpose. Lana asked what that was. Evelyn smiled with cracked lips. To remember us wrong. And to feed on who we thought we were. That night, Tom opened his chest to find another note inside. One word. Scrawled in sharp graphite. Familiar. Heavy. Final. Welcome back. Tom cut his finger while shaving. Just a nick. But the blood that came out wasn't red. It was gray. He stared at it for a full minute before wiping it on the towel. It left no stain. No mark. Just an oily, ashen smear, like soot from a long-dead fire. He didn't tell Lana. Not yet. That morning, Evelyn sat in the kitchen reading a birth certificate. But not her own. It had Tom's name on it. Date of birth, July 3, 1971. Mother, Evelyn Grace Harper. Father, unknown. She slid it across the table and said, "That's not when you were born." Tom didn't blink. How do you know? She smiled thinly. Because I was 13 in 1971. And I remember when you arrived. You were already 35. Lana found the family tree burned into the underside of the dining table. Names carved in circles, spiraling inward. At the center, Micah. Branches shot outward in every direction. Some names were crossed out. Others had question marks. And some, like hers, had two versions. Lana, 1. Lana, 5. Evelyn, 2. Evelyn, 6. Next to Tom's name was a symbol instead of a number. A loop. A sideways figure 8. Evelyn ran her fingers across it and muttered, "You're the thread that never snaps." At dusk, the house shifted again. Not the walls this time, but the photos. Every picture frame now contained different moments. Evelyn holding a baby Lana. Tom in military uniform, kneeling beside a gravestone that read, Micah Harper, 1985 to 1990. Lana standing at a wedding altar, alone. And in every photo, the faces looked real. Too real. Not posed. Not staged. Almost like surveillance. Lana took down one of the photos and opened the back. Inside, instead of cardboard, there was skin, thin, dried, like parchment. A note was scratched into it. You are not born. You are remembered into existence. Tom finally told them about the gray blood. Evelyn didn't seem surprised. It happens when the house begins reclaiming you, she said. You were made here. Not conceived. What the hell does that mean? She didn't answer. Just turned back to the mirror, where her reflection had started aging backward. That night, Lana had a dream. In it, she was pregnant. Her stomach heavy, pulsing. But when she looked down, she saw multiple hands pressing outward from inside her, reaching for freedom. When she woke up, she was bleeding. But the sheets weren't stained red. They were bone white. And beneath the mattress, she found a crib. One that hadn't been there before. Inside, a note written in soot. The child is not yours. It belongs to the house. Micah appeared again. At least, they thought it was him. He was older now. About 10. Standing in the hallway in a suit 2 sizes too small. Where have you been? Lana asked. He blinked slowly and replied, waiting to be assigned. To who? To whoever forgets first. He turned and walked through a door that hadn't existed 5 seconds before. When they opened it, there was no room, just a black void filled with thousands of whispering voices. Evelyn closed it. Don't chase him. That's how you disappear into someone else's story. Tom began growing more restless. He started carving into the walls. Not with words, but diagrams. Organs. Machines. Blueprints for some kind of human engine. He couldn't explain why. Only that it made the buzzing in his teeth stop. One morning, they found a draft of a will in his handwriting. It read, "To whom it may concern, I leave nothing. Not even the blood. Because the blood was never mine. It was a rental. And the terms are up." He'd signed it, T. Harper, 6th or 7th, unclear. The basement door opened again. But this time, it didn't lead downward. It led to a hallway filled with birth rooms. Each room bore a name. Lana. Tom. Evelyn. Micah. Inside each, a replica of their childhood bedrooms. Every detail perfect. Even things they'd forgotten, like the chipped toy soldier from Tom's closet, or the lavender nightlight Lana's mother swore had burned in a fire. But none of these things had ever come from this house. Then how does it know? Tom asked. Evelyn answered quietly, because it's not a house. It's a family machine. Built from grief. Fed by misremembrance. Lana opened her own room. In the center, a woman lay on the bed, dead. Her face identical to Lana's. Her arms outstretched, palms up. On each palm, a different name tattooed. One said, Mother. The other said, Daughter. When Lana reached out to touch the corpse, the eyes opened. Just for a moment. And whispered, Choose. They left the basement hallway and didn't speak for hours. That night, Evelyn cut her own arm open. Inside, instead of flesh, was a ribbon of film, wound tightly around bone. Tom unwound some of it and held it to the light. A scene played, Evelyn's wedding. Only it wasn't Tom beside her, it was someone younger. And Lana was in the crowd. Clapping. Smiling. A guest. The final frame of the film read. She made herself the matriarch. But she forgot she was also the seed. At midnight, the mirrors blackened again. Every reflection now showed one thing. A man. Dressed in burial clothes. Standing in the center of the house. Holding something in his hands, a silver cup. He raised it. Poured the contents onto the floor. It wasn't water. It was blood. But not his. Yours. The house had grown quiet again. Too quiet. No creaks, no hums, not even the ghost of wind through the chimney. Tom thought it felt like the pause in a play, just before the curtain rises. And he wasn't wrong. Because when they woke up that morning, all three of them were in costumes. Evelyn wore a 1950s housewife dress, hair in perfect curls, lipstick blood red. Tom was in a gray suit, briefcase in hand, tie strangling him a little too tightly. Lana, she was in a cheerleader uniform. Bright white. Perfect pleats. Shoes shined like mirrors. Pinned to her chest, a name tag that read, simply, Daughter. There were scripts at the breakfast table. Typed pages. Stapled. Numbered. 3 copies. They each had their names on them. Each line written in Courier New. Stage directions included. Tom picked his up and flipped through. His hands trembled. Evelyn didn't read hers. She just said, I've performed this version before. Lana asked, what happens if we don't follow it? Tom already knew the answer. Because his hand began moving on its own, bringing the coffee cup to his lips. He didn't even drink coffee. The day unfolded like a sitcom. Fake laughter. Canned applause. Everywhere they turned, invisible audiences responded. Lana tried to leave the living room, but bumped into something invisible. A wall that wasn't there yesterday. Evelyn opened the fridge to find the same carton of milk, repeating itself on every shelf, labeled, Prop 006, spoilage suspended. Tom tried to break a window, but the glass reset itself, like water forming back into ice. When he smashed the dining chair against the door, the script fluttered open in his coat pocket, and a new line appeared. Tom sighs, defeated. He accepts his place. And without meaning to, Tom sighed. That night, Lana wandered into the hallway and found a costume rack. Thousands of outfits. Labeled, bagged, ready. Each with a tag that read, "For next draft." She found her own face on a mannequin head. Slightly older. A little sadder. Beneath it, a sticky note. Daughter 2.0, less defiant. More grateful. She tore the head off and threw it to the ground. The lights flickered, and from the ceiling, a voice called. Reshoot required. Evelyn confronted the mirror again. This time, it spoke back. Not in her voice, but in her mother's. You never learned your lines, did you? Evelyn shook her head. I improvised. The reflection smiled. But its teeth were wrong, too many, too small. That's why they keep recasting you. Why they let you age when no one else does. Evelyn turned away. But behind her, the reflection lingered in the glass, watching her go. Tom sat in the bathroom, script in hand. He noticed something strange. Certain lines were identical to the ones he remembered hearing his father say, back when he was 5. Lines like, "The man of the house makes the rules. Real men don't cry. They carry. If it bleeds, you bury it." Only now, they were assigned to him. As if the house had archived every toxic inheritance, every generational curse, and folded it into this new version. And now it was his turn to deliver them. Later that night, Lana broke into the attic. Not because she was looking for answers, but because she felt pulled. Inside, she found a stage. Wooden. Spotlit. With rows of empty chairs staring back. A teleprompter flickered to life. Lana, the daughter monologue. And the lines began scrolling. I am the echo of a mother's silence. I am the version of a girl that makes her father smile. I am not supposed to leave. I am not supposed to scream. I am the laugh track. I am the pause between commercials. I am what the house feeds to itself when it gets lonely. Lana screamed and smashed the screen. From the rafters, an audience began clapping, slowly. Not for her, but for the script. Evelyn found the director's chair in the basement. It was labeled, Micah, original writer, now deceased. On it was a notebook. Its pages were full of early drafts, versions of their lives that never happened. Evelyn as a doctor. Tom as an artist. Lana never born. Micah never lost. At the bottom of each page was the same note in Micah's childish handwriting. Didn't work. Try again. She flipped to the last page. Only 2 words. final draft. The next morning, the scripts were gone. The costumes, too. But they still moved like actors. Still spoke with lines that weren't entirely their own. And when Lana tried to call her mother by her first name, her throat locked. She could only say, "Mom," even though she wasn't sure Evelyn was her real mother anymore. If she ever had been. They ate dinner in silence. Lana looked at Tom and asked, "Do you think we were ever real?" He didn't answer. Just stared at the empty seat across from them. The one that used to belong to Micah. And quietly, almost too softly to hear, Tom whispered, "I think we were written to be forgotten." And in the corner of the room, behind the wallpaper, something began erasing itself. A door. A birth record. A bedroom. A name. Tom found a photograph in the fireplace. It hadn't burned completely, just curled at the corners, edges singed black like scorched skin. It showed him, maybe 6 years old, sitting in a pumpkin patch. Evelyn knelt beside him, smiling. Lana wasn't there. Except Tom didn't remember any of it. He had never been to a pumpkin patch. He hated Halloween. And Evelyn. Evelyn looked too young in the picture. Like a sister, not a mother. But on the back, written in Micah's handwriting, "Remember to forget." Tom held it over the fire again. But it wouldn't burn. Instead, it screamed. Lana opened her closet and found a shoebox full of teeth. Baby teeth. Labeled. Dated. Each one had a memory attached to it. When she picked one up, her head filled with a scene. She was 4. On a swing. Someone pushed her too high. She flew off, hit the gravel, screamed for Micah. But when the memory ended, she realized something horrifying. She hadn't screamed, Micah. She'd screamed, "Mom." But Micah was her brother. Wasn't he? She looked at the rest of the teeth. Each was a key to a different timeline, ones that didn't agree with each other. Evelyn stood in front of a wall she hadn't noticed before. It was covered in sticky notes, Polaroids, and bits of string like some conspiracy board. At the center, a phrase repeated over and over. "Memory is a house. You can't leave it, only redecorate." She traced a thread from her photo to Lana's. Halfway through, it split. 2 parallel strings, one marked mother, the other sister. Her hands began to tremble. She followed the strings down and found a third one. This one was labeled Tenant. The house had a new smell that day. Burned paper. Wet concrete. Lemon. Whenever someone remembered something real, the scent would grow stronger. Tom noticed it every time he recalled his father's voice, not the scripted one, but the one that had shouted at him during a thunderstorm, made him dig a grave for a dying bird. But now, he wasn't sure that had ever happened. When he asked Evelyn, she said, That's not in the timeline anymore. Lana chimed in, which version? Evelyn looked away. The one that worked. That night, Evelyn returned to her old journals. But every page had been revised. Not scratched out, not destroyed. Edited. In Micah's handwriting. He had rewritten their past like a ghostly showrunner. Evelyn no longer teaches. Lana never had the lake accident. Tom must forget the truth about the cellar. The more Evelyn read, the more her head throbbed. Her eyes watered. Her spine burned. Then she found a page left untouched. It read, "If you remember too much, the house remembers you back." The page began to bleed from the bottom corner. Lana began to forget how old she was. One morning she woke up and felt 13 again, angry, fragile, coated in embarrassment like sweat. Another day she was 25. She swore she'd already moved out. Her closet changed daily. Her shoes resized themselves. The mirror reflected a girl who didn't look like her, but like variations of her. And yet, the house never forgot her fear. That always stayed the same. Tom ventured into the crawlspace beneath the stairs. He followed a trail of melted tape and forgotten birthday candles. At the end, he found dozens of time capsules, all labeled with years that didn't exist. Inside each, fragments of memories that no one claimed. One had a VHS tape titled, "Dad's Last Apology." Another had a crayon drawing of a family of 4, with the 4th member's face scratched out. In the darkest box, he found a cassette recorder. When he played it, Micah's voice whispered, "None of this is real unless you remember it." Evelyn stood in front of the dining room mirror. It had cracked overnight, hairline fractures like veins spidering outward. She stared at herself. But her reflection didn't copy her movements. Instead, it looked terrified. Then, the reflection whispered, "You were never her mother." Evelyn blinked. Then the cracks rearranged themselves into words. "You just wanted to be." That night, Lana dreamed of the house. Not how it looked, but how it felt, a living memory. She was inside its bloodstream. Every hallway a vein. Every door a valve. And she saw Micah. Sitting on the roof, scribbling in his notebook. Except he had no eyes. Just keyholes. And he said, "The more you remember, the closer the house gets to finishing you." Lana asked, "Finishing what?" Micah smiled with his skin. "The story." When Lana woke, she could no longer recall her own name. She asked Evelyn, and Evelyn said, "You were Lana once." She asked Tom, and he said, "That was one of the better versions." But when she looked into the mirror, a word was written across her forehead. Carved into condensation. Slowly evaporating. Erased. And in the silence that followed, the house whispered, "You don't belong in this draft anymore." Lana woke up on the hallway floor with film strips tangled around her fingers. They were slick with something like oil, or blood. Each strip showed a moment that had never happened. Or worse, almost did. One frame, Evelyn screaming into an open well. Another, Tom holding a newborn with blacked-out eyes. The last one. Lana, cutting her own hair in the garage, whispering, "Don't tell him I'm still here." But she had no idea who he was. The reel began to melt in her hands. Behind her, a voice whispered, "You're in the deleted scenes now." Tom discovered a room that shouldn't exist. Not because it was hidden, but because it was empty in a way nothing else in the house was. No light. No smell. No texture. Just a white door with a black handle, and the word scratched across it. Final cut. Inside, a projector ran with no film. But when Tom stepped in, he became the film. Suddenly he was 5 years old again, standing on the roof, crying for someone. Not for help. For permission. "Can I jump now?" he asked the dark sky. And something replied. "Not yet. You haven't finished your scene." Evelyn found a videotape labeled, "The Daughter We Never Had." She hesitated. Then inserted it into the old VCR in the guest room, the one they all avoided because it still smelled like Micah's cologne. The screen flickered. At first, static. Then a girl about 10, sitting at the kitchen table. She looked straight at the camera and said, "Hi, Mom." Evelyn fell back in the chair. Because the girl had her voice. Her eyes. But she didn't exist. Not in any family photo, any letter, any fight. And then, the girl said, "You let him forget me. So I came back hungry." The mirrors in the house began to disagree with each other. In the bathroom, Evelyn looked young. 25. Unsure. Grieving. In the bedroom, she was old, wrinkled, distant, holding a bottle of pills. And in the hallway, she wasn't there at all. Instead, the mirror showed Lana and Tom, hugging something between them, something Evelyn couldn't quite see. Until it turned. And it had Micah's face, but no mouth. Lana kept hearing editing sounds in the walls. The snip of scissors. The whir of a tape spool. The thunk of a deleted file. Late one night, she followed the sound and found a room she'd never seen before. An editing suite, but analog. Real reels. Real razors. Real glue. And seated at the desk, Micah. He turned to her and said, "Welcome to the cutting room. This is where we decide what parts of you survive." He held up a strip of her face. Only half of it was intact. The other half was smiling, but it wasn't hers. Tom began to forget how to speak. Certain words wouldn't come. Home became host. Family became format. And truth just vanished. When he tried to write it down, the pen burst. When he tried to whisper it, his tongue went numb. But the house kept speaking. Through radio static. Through rain tapping on windows. Through Evelyn's sobs behind closed doors. Every story needs an ending. But not all endings are earned. Lana found a notebook under the floorboards, one of Micah's. But this one was different. It was written entirely in stage directions. Lana enters from basement. Hair wet. She smells of rot but doesn't know why. She asks about Evelyn, but no one answers. She checks the attic. It's snowing inside. Her heart skips. Her memory jumps. The audience gasps. At the bottom of the page. Cut to black. And in the margins, a note scrawled in charcoal. If she reads this far, she can't be saved. Evelyn opened a drawer in the hallway desk. Inside, 3 keys. None of which fit any doors in the house. Attached were labels. Lana's second chance. Tom's first lie. Micah's last tape. She held them in her hand, but they began to rust instantly. Behind her, the walls began to breathe. The paint peeled off in strips that revealed sentences underneath. Sentences like, "She chose the wrong daughter. He remembers the wrong version. You are not the author." Tom finally asked the question he'd been avoiding. "Where's Dad?" Evelyn said nothing. Lana looked at the floor. And the house laughed. Not with sound, but structure, a groan through pipes, a ripple through wallpaper, a sudden shiver through floorboards. In the hallway, a door appeared. Just for a moment. On it, Dad's room, do not enter. But they didn't. They couldn't. Because they all remembered what happened last time. Or tried to forget. That night, they each had the same dream. A dinner table with no food. Only place cards. Each card bore a name scratched out. Except one. You are what's missing. And when they woke up, their own reflections were gone. At 3:03 a.m., all the clocks stopped ticking. Then, in unison, they began to tick backward. 1 second. Then a minute. Then an hour. By dawn, it was yesterday again. The news on the radio talked about a blizzard that had already passed. The milk in the fridge was unspoiled. Micah was listed as missing again, not presumed dead. And in Evelyn's journal, the latest entry had vanished. In its place, scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting. Rewind successful. Ready to record. Lana opened the attic and found a nursery. Soft yellow wallpaper. A mobile turning lazily. A crib too large for any infant. It hadn't been there before. She didn't remember ever being a baby in this house. But the moment she stepped inside, she felt smaller. Not physically, but emotionally. Helpless. Forgotten. Hungry. There were no toys. Only a single VHS tape in the crib, labeled Pilot Episode, Lana, Age 0. She picked it up. The mobile stopped spinning. Tom discovered that his bedroom had changed. His posters were gone. His books replaced with picture dictionaries and learning toys. On the desk sat a single object, a red button with a tag that read, "Press to restart." He hesitated. When he pressed it, the lights went out. A voice in the dark whispered, "Welcome back, Tommy. We've missed your first words." Then the room filled with static lullabies. And on the wall, glowing faintly in blue chalk, memory wiped, emotion retained. Evelyn stepped into the kitchen and found her mother. Alive. Wearing the same dress she was buried in. She turned and smiled, warm and wide. "Good morning, baby." Cereals on the table. Evelyn sat down automatically. But the cereal was empty. The milk carton bled ink. The spoon was soft, like wax. She looked up. Her mother's face had no mouth. Still, the voice came again. "You said you wanted one more morning. Now eat it. Or it eats you." Outside the windows, the neighborhood reset. Houses reappeared where they had burned down. The mail truck drove backward. The birds flew in reverse, unchirping. Micah's car sat in the driveway again. Untouched. Uncrashed. Windows spotless. Tom ran out to it and opened the trunk. Inside, his own suitcase. Tagged. Tom, Reboot Candidate 002. Inside, fresh clothes. A note. This time, try not to question the basement. Lana stood in the hallway and watched the paint roll itself back onto the walls. The bloodstains were absorbed. The cracks sealed. The pictures rehung themselves, but the faces in them were different now. She wasn't beside Evelyn in the Halloween photo anymore. Instead, it was a girl with her same haircut, but sharper features. Unsmiling. And Evelyn's label had changed too. Now it read, "Caretaker, role under review." Lana turned to the mirror. Her name was now Lauren. The house spoke through the vents. Casting complete. Micah's bedroom light flicked on for the first time in weeks. They all heard the door creak open. But when they checked, no one was inside. Only a director's chair in the center. On it, a clipboard. Scene 1, Take 2. Micah returns. No one remembers. Let him stay this time. And beneath it, do not improvise. That night, a dinner appeared on the table. Lamb. Mashed potatoes. Red wine. They didn't make it. No one remembered cooking. But they were hungry. Tom reached for the fork, but Evelyn stopped him. "It's poison." Lana shrugged. Maybe. But we're already dead. Or rewritten. She took a bite. Then another. Then smiled, not happily, but like someone reading a line off a script. Delicious. And from inside the walls, the house applauded. After dinner, the living room lights dimmed automatically. A projector screen rolled down by itself. Across the top, words appeared. The House That Fed Itself, Season 2 premiere. Tom turned to Evelyn. What does that mean? Evelyn whispered. It means we didn't end it in time. Lana reached for the remote that had appeared in her lap. Only one button, replay. She asked, what happens if we press it? No one answered. Because no one had written that part yet. In the attic nursery, the mobile started spinning again. The tape in the crib played on its own. Flickering images on the wall, a family, smiling. Laughing. Growing. Then. Screaming. Feeding. Forgetting. And over it all, Micah's voice. If you can't escape the story, become the part they can't erase. The tape ended with a blank screen. But for the first time, the screen spoke back. Recording resumed. Evelyn sat on the staircase, staring at the family portrait at the end of the hall. Only now, her face was missing. Not blurred. Not scratched out. Just, gone. An empty silhouette where she used to be. She walked toward it, hand trembling, and as she approached, words burned onto the frame. Understudy. She whispered to herself, I lived this life. The portrait whispered back. You filled in. Tom opened the coat closet. It had always been shallow, scarves, umbrellas, a dusty vacuum. But now it stretched impossibly deep, filled with rows of costumes. Not clothes. Costumes. His own high school jacket. Lana's childhood ballet uniform. Micah's college hoodie, never washed, still smelling like burnt plastic and cologne. And dozens more, for people he didn't know. Each had a label. Mother 4. Daughter, Scene 6 only. Micah Beta version 2.2. Tom stumbled back. His own name tag read. Prop. Disposable. Optional lines. Lana was in the garage when she found the audition tapes. Dozens of them, stacked in black VHS cases, labeled in Sharpie. Evelyn, brief testa. Tom, rage monologue. Lana, rejection number 3. She played 1. It showed herself, 5 years younger, crying in a hospital hallway. But she didn't remember this. She didn't even know where the scene was filmed. Behind her, a producer's voice said, "That was good, but we need more fear. Try again, Lana. Make it real this time." Lana dropped the tape. It cracked. The floor beneath her split open like a mouth. Upstairs, Evelyn stood in front of the mirror again. this time, it didn't reflect her. Instead, it showed a woman she didn't recognize, taller, meaner, almost mechanical in how she smiled. And yet, she wore Evelyn's wedding ring. She cradled Lana's infant self. She kissed Tom on the forehead. The mirror labeled her Evelyn, original. Evelyn backed away. The mirror whispered, "They replaced her with you. You never knew. That's why the house won't love you." Tom, panicking, fled to the basement, the one place they never went anymore. But now it looked like a studio backlit. Sets partially built. Fake trees. Cardboard walls. Rain machines. In the middle stood a director's chair, empty. On the floor lay a script titled, "The House That Fed Itself, Final Revision." He picked it up and flipped to the last page. There was no ending. Only the words. Tom exits. Lights fade. No one remembers him. The family gathered in the living room as the lights began to dim again. Not because they planned to. Because the house summoned them. The TV turned on without a click. On screen, a voice, deep, calm, unmerciful, narrated. In the story of the American home, some characters are permanent. Some are prototypes. Others are placeholders. They never mattered. They only filled time. Lana stood. "We matter." The voice answered. "You mattered for test audiences. But the real cast returns tomorrow." Evelyn whispered. "We're being overridden." Suddenly, the front door burst open. A man entered. Not Micah. But someone, close. Same posture. Same eyes. But no soul behind them. He looked around and smiled. "I'm home." The others stood frozen. The house played applause. From the ceiling, dust fell like stage glitter. Evelyn tried to scream, but found her voice replaced with static. The man walked over to Lana and said, "Nice work keeping my seat warm." Then kissed her on the forehead. Her skin burned blue. Tom tried to leave. Tried the back door. The side door. Even the window. But outside wasn't outside anymore. Just audience bleachers in darkness. Rows of shadows, clapping in sync. One leaned forward and said, "We loved you in the dinner scene. But your arc's complete." Tom shouted, "I'm not a character." The shadows replied in a single hiss. "Then why were you written?" That night, Lana wrote something on the bathroom mirror with lipstick. Only 3 words. "We were cast." Evelyn saw it and added beneath, "We can recast." They looked at each other. In that moment, something snapped inside the house. A spotlight in the hallway exploded. A wall cracked open like a ribcage. And from it, spilled pages and pages of alternate scripts. Failed endings. unshot scenes, characters that had been removed. Among them, Micah's original lines, all crossed out, except one. Burn the reel. In the fireplace, Evelyn began to feed the pages to flame. One by one, Lana added the audition tapes. Tom added the script. The fire roared louder than it should have. The shadows outside screamed. The house howled. And deep in the floorboards, something stirred. Something that had written them once, and now realized it could not rewrite what burned. Evelyn no longer cried. She wrote. On the walls. On the floor. In the margins of the house's fake history books. With lipstick, with ashes, with blood. I am not a line. I am not a scene. I am the revision. Lana watched her from the hallway, holding a pair of kitchen scissors. Not for cutting paper. For cutting tethers. The house's walls throbbed like veins. Pulsed with anger, like it knew. Static crawled along the ceilings. The projector screen unfurled again, against their will. Across it flashed rewritten text. Scene 18, unauthorized rewrite detected. Discipline commencing. But when the projector tried to play its tape, it jammed. Evelyn had already slashed the reel with a carving knife. And she was holding the melted plastic like a trophy. You fed on us. Now starve. Tom had retreated into the study, only now, it looked like a writer's room. Dry erase boards filled with family arcs. Character bios. Plot beats. On one board, under his name, it read, Tom, instability subplot. Potential suicide arc ends in basement epiphany. He grabbed the eraser and scrubbed it out. Then he wrote in its place. Tom, saboteur. Burn structure. Lives. The lights above him popped. The boards began to vibrate, resisting change. But Tom smiled. He whispered, try and stop me. And set fire to the floor plans. In the attic, Lana found a locked chest. Inside, typewriters. Mechanical, monstrous, still dripping ink. Each one typed by itself. Without keys being pressed. One was writing a scene in real time. Lana discovers the chest. She cries. She obeys. She forgets. She kicked it across the room. I remember. She smashed it with a hammer. Another one began typing. Lana attacks props. Delusion arc initiated. But she had already found the power cord and yanked it out. Then she turned and rewired it into the wall outlet, with a twist. The next time it powered on, it printed what she thought. Her first command. Micah returns with his original self. Somewhere in the house, a door creaked open. They gathered in the dining room once more. But this time, they set the table themselves. No ghostly hands. No conjured meals. Only paper, matches, gasoline, and the house's working script. Micah stepped in from the foyer, soaked and silent. He didn't smile. He didn't speak. He just dropped a single object on the table. A lighter. It bore the house's emblem. Now it belonged to them. Evelyn looked to the others. We are no longer family. Tom, we are no longer characters. Lana, we are no longer afraid. Micah, then what are we? The fireplace answered for them. You are rejection. And rejection always burns hottest. They threw the script into the flame. And the house screamed. Every room folded. Every hallway snapped. Doors slammed and reopened as different shapes. The couch twisted into a typewriter. The bathtub became a projector. The house bled ink. Outside, the darkness screamed like a laugh track glitching. The audience, those endless rows of silent watchers, melted into static. On the TV, a final warning. Burn the story, lose the frame. Burn the frame, invite the director. They paused. And Evelyn said, then we burn the director. Micah led them to the center of the house, a room that had never been there before. Perfectly round. No windows. No doors. Just a single chair. Facing them. On it, a man in a suit. But his face was blank. Glitching. Different every second. One moment he looked like Evelyn's father. The next, like Micah as a child. Then like no one. In his hands, a script marked, Final Cut. He stood and said, voice neutral and terrifying. You shouldn't be here. Tom stepped forward. Neither should you. And lit the match. The match flared. The director didn't flinch. The house shook. Walls peeled like paper. Ceilings shattered into film strips. Outside, the sky cracked, revealing scaffolding, lights, a giant eye watching. The director opened his mouth. And 1,000 voices poured out. All of them lines the family had spoken. All of them twisted. Used against them. But Evelyn screamed one line back. We are not your rehearsal. She threw the match into the script. It caught instantly. The director began to burn from the words up. Not flesh. Not bone. But line after line after line. And as he burned, he whispered. Good performance. The room crumbled. Reality flickered. For a moment, the house disappeared entirely. The family stood on a stage, under lights, surrounded by a hollow theater. Empty rows. Burned reels. No watchers left. Only them. And in the silence, Micah asked, did we win? Lana replied, we're unwritten. Evelyn, but still here. Tom, so now what? They turned to the ashes of the final script. And Lana smiled. We write our own. They awoke on the kitchen floor. No walls. No roof. Just the floorboards, hovering in blackness. No air. No sounds. Not even gravity, just a vague, impossible sensation of weight. Evelyn rose first. Her skin shimmered slightly, like an image glitching between filters. Do you feel it? She whispered. Tom sat up, hands trembling. There's nothing under us. Lana looked up into a sky with no stars. Just white text flickering in midair. Chapter 19, Improvised Space. Stability unknown. She muttered, it's still writing us. But Evelyn corrected her. No, it's watching us write ourselves. The house didn't reform. Instead, pieces of it hovered in the void, like dream fragments. A hallway, split in half and dangling. A bathtub, floating sideways. An upside-down front door, opening into nothing. Micah stepped through one of them and vanished. Then returned, panting, wide-eyed. There's no ending. Lana, did you see anything? Micah, not, see. Just felt. Like a constant question. Like a cursor blinking in my brain, waiting. Tom snapped, then maybe we stop blinking and start typing. He raised his voice to the void. We want out. Silence. Then. No such command. They wandered for what felt like hours. But there was no time. Their watches melted. Their shadows shifted direction. Sometimes they saw copies of themselves walking ahead, like alternative drafts. Sometimes they were children. Sometimes they weren't even human. The deeper they walked, the less real they became. Lana's voice started lagging, spoken words arriving seconds after her mouth moved. Evelyn's thoughts bled onto her skin like tattoos. Micah kept changing height. Each blink a different version of himself. And Tom began hearing music, laughter, scene transitions. You're not real, he muttered to the sky. The sky replied. Neither are you. They found a mirror floating alone. But the mirror showed a different family. Smiling. Traditional. Scripted. Lana said, is that us? Evelyn shook her head. That's who we were supposed to be. Micah asked, so what are we now? The mirror cracked, and the reflection bled out into the void like spilled ink. From its depths, a voice said, you are placeholders. You are broken continuity. You are what happens when the story escapes the outline. Then the mirror burst into white fire. And the platform beneath them shuddered. They ran. Not from something, but from the loss of logic. Every step echoed in reverse. Memories looped out of order. Evelyn saw her own birth as a replay on the sky. Tom's hands typed words in midair that became doors, then traps. Lana found herself narrating aloud, unable to stop. She descends the stairs. She finds the matchbox. She forgets the last scene. Micah vomited up words, literal pages curled from his throat, covered in ink. None of it made sense. None of it stopped. Until they collapsed again. All four of them, huddled in the last solid fragment left, the living room couch. Floating. Alone. They didn't speak for a while. What was there to say? When Evelyn finally opened her mouth, she whispered, "I missed the script." Lana nodded. At least it pretended to make sense. Tom chuckled, bitter and dry. "We burned the frame." Micah added, "And now the story's eating itself." A long silence. Then Evelyn said, with quiet resolve, "Then we rebuild one." They began gathering pieces, memories, fragments, discarded scenes. A bedtime story from Evelyn's childhood. A script page Micah had kept hidden. Lana's dreams. Tom's lies. They stitched them together, not with logic, but intention. They wrote a new chapter. With no outline. No ending. Just a phrase, chiseled into the floor. We define ourselves. And the world around them trembled. Not in anger. In agreement. A door appeared. They approached it. Before opening it, Evelyn looked at the others and said, "If there's something on the other side, Lana, it'll be what we choose. Tom, or what we deserve. Micah, or what chooses us." They pushed it open together. And stepped through. What waited beyond was not the house. Not the void. Not the watchers. But a blank page. A real one. Waiting. With one line already written. Chapter 20, Author. Evelyn took a pen. And began. The page was blank. Not white. Not empty. Hungry. It pulsed as Evelyn wrote the first word, "we." The ink didn't dry. It melted into the world. A floor formed beneath their feet. Walls followed, fragile, dreamlike, like stage flats barely holding their shape. Then, a light. Not from a bulb. From the idea of one. They were in a new house. But this one didn't have voices in the walls. No lurking camera eyes. No script hovering above them. Just four people. Holding a pen. Tom sat down at the kitchen table. It was too smooth, too perfect. It reminded him of storyboards. He pressed his hand against it. "Feels fake." Evelyn replied, "Everything real started out fake. Even us." Micah looked around. What if we're just inside another layer? Lana frowned. Does it matter? A long silence. Then Evelyn stood. We write, or we're written. That's all we know. They each took turns writing one sentence at a time. At first, it was simple. The windows stayed shut. The night never quite arrived. No one spoke unless they meant it. But soon the sentences began reacting to them. When Lana wrote, a fire flickered in the fireplace. The room warmed. When Tom scribbled, the hallway never changed. The hallway froze, suspended in one static image. When Micah tried, nothing could get in. He turned and found the mirror again. But this time, it reflected a theater. Still empty. Still watching. Wait, Tom said. That theater, why does it keep showing up? Micah's voice was thin. Because someone is watching. Lana, still. Evelyn nodded. Always. They turned toward the mirror. And saw not just the theater seats, but someone in them. A single figure. Back turned. Writing. A hand moved across a journal. Slowly. Firmly. Tom whispered, "Is that the director?" Evelyn shook her head. "No. That's the author." They stepped through the mirror. It no longer shattered. It welcomed them. They stood now on the stage of that endless theater. The seats stretched beyond logic. Each row impossibly long. But every seat held only one thing. A version of themselves. Thousands. Millions. Every iteration, every failed draft, every rewritten Evelyn, every erased Lana. Micah saw himself hang from a ceiling fan. Tom saw himself bury a daughter he never had. Lana saw herself smiling through lies in an unbroken script. Evelyn saw herself vanish mid-sentence. All of them turned in unison to face the stage. And whispered, "We remember." A voice filled the theater. Not loud. Not sharp. Just familiar. You asked for authorship. But authorship is sacrifice. Authorship is knowing that what you create will one day betray you. Authorship is losing control, and loving what grows in its place. The lights turned inward. Onto the final chair in the front row. Where the author sat. Back still turned. Writing. Evelyn stepped off the stage. Approached. "Who are you?" The author replied without turning. "You." She reached out. Touched the author's shoulder. The world fractured. Like a house of mirrors imploding into truth. She saw it all at once. The house didn't feed itself, it fed on what they hid. The watchers weren't audience, they were versions of self. The scripts weren't written by ghosts, they were written by trauma. The story was not about a haunted house. The house was the story. Back on the stage, Evelyn opened her eyes. Tears streamed silently. "We did this." Tom asked, "Then can we undo it? Lana, or can we forgive it?" Micah held up the journal, the one the author had been writing. Its last page was blank. He handed it to Evelyn. She took a breath. Wrote one sentence. The house no longer needed to feed. The lights dimmed. The watchers vanished. And the stage became a real home. Not perfect. Not clean. But theirs. Micah walked into the kitchen and flicked on a switch. The bulb hummed. Nothing screamed. Tom opened a drawer. It only held forks. No teeth. No scripts. No whispers. Lana looked at the fireplace. It was cold. Evelyn placed the journal on the mantel. And for the first time in the story, no one said anything. There was nothing left to fear. Only something left to live together.